And God loves working in the unexpected because that's what captures our attention. That's what keeps our attention going, is when things don't happen the way we want. Could it be that God's intent was to come in an unexpected way so that only the humble would understand? I propose to you that that's the case. And that God himself was the one who knew. And how does this relate to us? How does the expectations of Jesus being the conquering king, but coming as a suffering servant, how does that relate to you and I? Well, a lot of us have expectations for ourselves. I have expectations on myself. And before I was a Christian, I had high expectations, and I would literally kick myself every time I didn't meet those expectations, whether it was in college, whether it was in relationships. But here's the good news. When I came to Christ, God began to free me from these false, personally put on expectations that I had for myself. Also, I had expectations on my family. You know, my dad and mom, they grew up without anything. My mom grew up in a single parent home for a majority of her life. My dad grew up as an orphan by age 10 in New York City. And they wanted so much more for myself and for my brother and sister. And they had expectations for us. They had expectations that I would be a doctor. They had expectations that my brother would be an attorney. None of that happened. And but here's the thing. God worked it out better than was expected. You know, I was the first one to give my life to Christ. When I came home and told my dad that I wasn't going to be in ministry, that I wasn't going to be a doctor, that I wanted to be in ministry, he was not too excited. He threatened to kick me out of the home. He told me, "I'm not happy with you." It was quite a tumultuous day. Amy was there with me when it happened. And Dad, you know I love you. But here's the great thing about it, because my mom and dad are watching right now. But the great thing about it is because of the tension of this thing, because it was unexpected, because my coming to Christ and changing my whole focus and career was so unexpected, it actually got my family's attention. And my brother gave his life to Christ. And then my mom recommitted her life to Christ. My dad gave his life to Christ. My sister gave her life to Christ. The story goes on and on and on. You guys, God loves working in the unexpected. And you're like, Pastor Dave, I believe I know what God's going to do. No, you don't. This is what causes us is to keep on seeking God. This is why we follow Jesus, because we don't know what God is doing. But if we follow Jesus, we can be assured that we can always be in his perfect plan for us. And maybe you don't have expectations on yourself, but other people have expectations on you, like my parents did on me. But here's the liberating truth. Jesus did not live for the expectations of people. He lived for the expectations of one, his Father in heaven. And this liberates us to know that we don't have to live for the expectations of others. We can live for God and for God alone. That causes us to be free. We can live a life scripted by God, not by men. God alone sees the entire picture. God alone knows what's going on backstage. God is like this master director doing a live presentation. Now, the shepherds had a little understanding of it. The wise men had a little glimpse of it. Herod's counselors had a little glimpse of it. The inhabitants of Bethlehem had a little snapshot. Zacharias and Elizabeth had something. Maybe Joseph and Mary had the best idea of what God was doing. But no one really understood the full picture except God. Now, I have a little question for you, a little bit of trivia, just off topic, just a little bit. Does anybody know the name of the director? I'm going to have you put this in the chat right now on Facebook or on YouTube. Does anybody know the name of the director for the children's classic movie Babe, who also did the CGI movie Happy Feet? Anyone know the name of the director? There's a man, an Australian-born man by the name of George Miller. But here's what's unexpected. You're like, George Miller, that's great, all these different children classic movies. Well, what put him on the map in the late 70s and early 80s was the Mad Max movies that came out. I think there was like 4 or 5 of them. I can't remember how many there were. And here you have a guy that did Mad Max. I think he was also a director for the re-release, the Mad Max Fury Road. I'm not saying go watch it, please me. Believe me, there's a lot better Christmas movies out there for you, okay? But who would have expected the director of Mad Max to be the one who does this classic, warm, fuzzy feeling, Babe movie about the pig, or Happy Feet? And Pastor, you're like, Pastor Dave, why do you bring this up? God alone knows the script, not just of the Christmas story, but of your story and of my story. God alone knows who you are, what you're going to be, what you're going to become, who you're going to marry, your children, the different friends that God's going to bring into your life, the different experiences you have. God and God alone. This is why we have to follow him. This is why Jesus has to be Lord, because it's always going to be a wild ride. Following Christ is not going to, we're not going to know it. We're not going to be able to script it. Only God alone. Let me tell you something. If you can script everything in your Christian life, you're not following Jesus. I'll say it again because I think you missed it. If you can script everything in your Christian life, you're not following Christ. Because when you follow Christ, there's so much that you don't know. There's so much that's not expected. But that's why we follow him, because at least we have that as the constant in our life. Okay? That's the thing. God sees the picture in our lives.